And this mission is something that became a reality for many of us with the founding of the European Union. It is as if it's from another world when we see Russia's war of aggression on Ukraine, the barbaric attack of Hamas on Israel, and the Iranian regime of terror and its nuclear weapon program targeting Israel. But these events are the new normal in the world in which we live. We need to look at what's happening, and we need to learn from these crimes. We must take a stance against them. We must draw the right conclusions from this new reality, because that's the only way we will be able to have liberty, freedom in Germany and in Europe, because the geopolitical turbulence that we are seeing in the world don't just impact on Germany indirectly. We are dealing with a new reality here, one that impacts on our liberty, on our security, on our prosperity directly. And as the Federal Republic of Germany, we must assert our interests in this new reality actively and directly. And the geopolitical situation we live in is one we need to shape as best we can. And we have all manner of options to do so, because in recent decades we have entered into alliances and have nurtured these alliances. We've created formats of European and international cooperation and reinforced them. Germany is not alone. We are part and are players in a dense network of partnerships and alliances. In this context, I'm talking first and foremost about the European Union, but I'm also talking about NATO and the G7. The fact that in all of these three formats, in just 2 weeks, we have met for extremely important summits is proof of how serious the challenges facing us are, but also proof of the opportunities for Germany and Europe to work together with our partners to improve the new realities we're confronted with. From these alliances, as Germany, we can shape the way the world develops in the years to come. But there are two things that we need to do this. We need to be strong, and we need reliability, both within Germany and externally. Colleagues, strength and reliability, that is what we are pursuing as the new German government and have been since we came together. We have shown since then that we are able to shape what's going on domestically. We have approved a package for investment and infrastructure, and incredibly quickly, we have introduced the migration transition as well, and we've shown our international partners that they can rely on us. Germany is back on the European and international stage. And this new resoluteness is something that the world has noticed and is something that our partners and friends appreciate. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, the G7 summit was the first welcome opportunity to discuss the important issues, the situation of the global economy, resource partnerships, the wars in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, migration, and the resilience of our democracies. This summit showed clearly that we are the 7 leading industrial nations of the world, and we stand together in all of the most important questions. There was consensus among us. The summit this year was very much about the escalation of Israel and Iran. The position of the German government is a clear one here. Israel has a right to defend its existence and the safety of its citizens. Part of the reason of state of the Mullah regime has been to annihilate the state of Israel. Our reason of state is to defend the state of Israel in its existence. Colleagues, that's the difference. And this is a difference that I will be making extremely clear moving forward. On the first day of the G7 summit, we agreed on a common declaration in this direction. This is an extremely encouraging sign and sends a clear signal from this summit. Without Iran, the 7th of October 2023 in Israel would not have been possible. Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels are terrorist organizations funded by Iran and equipped by Iran. The Iranian leadership is destabilizing the Middle East and has been for decades. The danger of their nuclear program is something that the International Atomic Agency has referred to in an alarming report just a few days ago, once again, for Germany and the international community. These organizations are clear. Iran must not have nuclear weapons. The Iranian leadership in recent days has once again announced that uranium enrichment of beyond 60% is something they're going to continue. This announcement, colleagues, and the fact that the centrifuges are so deeply underground in bunkers, access for the monitoring of the IAEA and the constant obscuring of what's really going on shows how seriously the Iranian nuclear program is and remains. And this is why I want to say it one more time. Today, we're very much hoping that Israel and the U.S. and their approach to stopping this will stop Iran from pursuing the aim of creating nuclear weapons once and for all. And it's not just Israel, but it's Europe and the world as a whole are under threat from this Iranian nuclear program. And yet the conflict with Iran must not destabilize the entire region and make the war rage, which is why we, as the German government, are doing everything we can to try and make a diplomatic effort to prevent this from happening. The appeal of the U.S. president for a ceasefire is something we welcome. If this ceasefire is successful after the military strikes of the U.S. and the Israeli army against the Iranian nuclear research stations in Tehran and Isfahan, we will have a more stable world. And we'd like to call on Iran and Israel to go along with this call for ceasefire. We are grateful to Qatar and other countries in the region for keeping a level head in these dramatic developments. With our partners in the NATO summit in The Hague, we will be talking about how we continue to stabilize the situation in the future. The exacerbation around the Iranian nuclear program doesn't mean we're losing sight of what else is going on. We are asking critically what aim Israel is pursuing in the Gaza Strip. And we urge there to be a more humanitarian way of dealing with the people in Gaza, particularly the elderly, the women, and the children. And now, today, the moment has arrived for there to be a ceasefire in Gaza. Allow me, colleagues, in this connection, to thank the German Foreign Minister for his intense diplomatic efforts in recent days and weeks, first and foremost with the foreign ministers of France and Britain. This was in coordination with Europe and the US, and the EU has shown its diplomatic capabilities and how it can speak with one voice. I also want to thank our foreign minister for his clarity about the association agreement with Israel. Suspending this or cancelling it altogether is something the German government will never agree to. Colleagues, the violent annexation of Crimea in 2014 was the reason why Russia was excluded from the G7 format. Putin shows us every day with his war crimes in Ukraine that rules of play that are international law are irrelevant to him, and that in the situation that's happening in the Middle East, he has not stopped his bombardment of Ukrainian cities. In fact, he stepped them up. There's a consensus that this war must end as soon as possible. Ukraine has agreed to an immediate ceasefire without any conditions at all. Russia has refused to accept this. And although we and our international partners in recent weeks have done everything we can to try to bring Russia to the negotiation tables, we have not been successful. Allow me to say once more, and I'm directing this to those who assert again and again that diplomatic means are not being pursued properly. A real peace, a permanent peace, requires a willingness for such a peace from all parties involved. With its new wave of attacks on the Ukrainian civil population, Russia has shown once again in a barbaric manner that it has no willingness to pursue a peaceful end to this conflict. Quite the opposite. The Russian President, just a few days ago, speaking to the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, declared once again that Russians and Ukrainians are one people, and all of Ukraine belongs to us, verbatim. He said that. Colleagues, in a situation like this, that is not a solution that will lead to peace. To give up your whole country, that's not a kind of dictated peace that we want. It's not the kind of peace that Ukraine wants. Real peace means working hard to reach conditions that can create a real peace. And that's exactly what we're doing in the European Union, shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. Putin only understands the language of force. And so working for peace now means speaking to him in the only language he understands. And the 18th sanction package against Russia, which will be discussed at the European Council, will be part of it. The shadow fleet with which he is becoming more and more aggressive. At the G7 summit and at my visit in Washington recently, I appealed explicitly for the U.S. to step up its own sanctions against Russia. U.S. President Donald Trump is aiming for the same aim as we are. It is my belief that the U.S. government will continue along this path. Colleagues, peace in Europe for coming generations is something we want to ensure. That's what it'll be about when we meet in The Hague for the NATO summit tonight and tomorrow. This summit is literally a historical one, and I'm not exaggerating. We will be approving spending considerably more on defense and on security. And we're not doing that to do a favor to the U.S. and its president, as some people argue. It is our firm conviction that we must do this because Russia is endangering the security and the liberty of the entire Euro-Atlantic region actively and aggressively, because we must fear that Russia will continue its war beyond Ukrainian borders. That's why we're doing it. And we're doing it because we share the conviction that we need to be so strong together that no one will dare to attack us. And this is why it is a historic situation we find ourselves in. In this situation, Germany must also take on responsibility, and we will. We will contribute our just share of the work in the alliance, which is why we are going to be pursuing our defense capabilities goals with our partners. And this is why a few months ago we already changed our constitution. The German armed forces will become the strongest conventional army in Europe, as our partners quite rightly expect us, based on our size, our economy, and our geography. On the eastern flank of NATO, we will be supporting our partners directly. The German defense minister and myself in early April visited the new brigade in Lithuania. And in Vilnius, I said, when they started their work there, and I'll say it again, for too long, we in Germany ignored the warnings of the Baltic states about the imperialistic policy Russia was pursuing. We have understood that we made a mistake here, and there is no way back once we have understood his aims. And therefore, I will repeat it again and say the security of Lithuania is Germany's security too. On Wednesday, I will go from the NATO summit to the European Council in Brussels. There, we will be speaking with our European partners about how the new money for defense can be mobilized together and spent together as efficiently as possible. The European strength to shape our defense security depends on our economic force as well. And that's good news for us, because with the European single market, we have a growing market which has huge potential. And this single market is our global insurance against shocks and external uncertainties. A key job we will be dealing with in Europe in the years to come is to ensure that this single market is strengthened, and at the same time to pursue an ambitious common European trading policy. And apart from the common goal of a turnaround in migratory flows in Europe, that will be the next subject we'll be discussing in the European Council, namely, how can we ensure the competitiveness of Europe's economy? Allow me to say, first and foremost, that with this German government, Germany will be voting for a sustainable, competitive economy in Europe. It's clear for us that we need progress in Europe when it comes to the austerity and investment union. We need to have a more integrated energy infrastructure. But we also need a comprehensive reduction of bureaucracy in order to free the business community from state interference. We need far less regulation in Europe, to put it another way. The European Commission, with its omnibus package, has taken a step towards simplification of existing regulations and reducing such bureaucracy. This is a step in the right direction, but there are many more steps that are needed. At the European Council, I will be advocating this, but I will be also urging for the laws in the future to be passed in the sense of a changing mindset. We need to have less regulation from the European level. And this is also a prerequisite for us to have successful trade policy, because we cannot expect the entire world to fit in with our complicated EU rules and standards. It's a question of competitiveness that we need to be broader base in terms of our trade partnerships, but it is a key question of strategic resilience, and it will decide the future. We need to do this quickly and have as many new trade agreements as possible, ideally as purely trade agreements that only require the approval of the European organizations and not these complicated processes that take days and years and have to be approved in Parliament. And against this background, colleagues, you know that the EU Commission at the moment is negotiating with the US administration to solve the tariff dispute. The European Union agrees, and all of the member states agree, that tariffs don't help anyone and they damage everyone. So it's in everybody's interest to ensure that the trade dispute with the US does not escalate further. I know that the European Commission is negotiating very carefully, and they have our support entirely. I very much hope that by early July there will be a solution in sight. Should this not be possible, however, we are prepared for this and have a number of options available to us. The EU can and will assert its interests. It is my impression from speaking with the US President is, however, that the US has an economic interest in continuing to cooperate with us, with Europe, and particularly with us in Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, it's also the case that our economic power makes it possible for us to be able to negotiate and shape the world as we want it to. It gives us the means to finance the social cohesion that makes living in freedom possible. And as a result, responsible policy making and this government must ensure the competitiveness of German trade and industry. And this is why this German government wants Germany to have and to remain a modern industrial country where all of the generations in Germany enjoy living and working. We will therefore quickly and consistently implement our rapid program that we've approved. We are already talking with the state premiers of the federal states and are working towards an agreement in Germany. The framework for public-private investment will be improved so that the companies can invest more in Germany and want to. At the same time, we will have fast, ambitious measures to reduce bureaucracy. Also, we'll be reducing the energy prices as well. Our energy policy will be affordable, reliable, and neutral in terms of which technology we approve. And we're going to change our mindset completely around regulation on a national level as well. We're going to stop a culture of distrust that does not help the black sheep, but damages everyone else's success. So against this background, ladies and gentlemen, it is a very good sign that the forecasts for the German economy as a whole is improving, but we need to see even more improvement here. The next priority for the German government will be that people in Germany as a whole experience that working hard pays off. And we are going to ease the burden on employees and workers, and the German Labour Ministry is working on replacing the citizens' income with another income support program. Let me say, ladies and gentlemen, that recent weeks were weeks of crisis, once again, of radical change and of violence in Ukraine, in Iran, in Israel, in Gaza. Recent weeks have also shown that we cannot assume that the world around us will calm down anytime soon. But what we can do is exert influence on how this new normal develops in our everyday lives. We can ensure that, at least for us, it goes hand in hand with liberty, prosperity, and peace. The entire German government is focusing on this aim with all of its strength. And in recent weeks, I have to say that I am confident we will get there, because recent weeks have shown that as a country, we can tackle this challenge and we can solve our own problems ourselves. But the prerequisite for this, and let me emphasize it one more time, is that we are strong inwardly as well as externally. Social cohesion is important, a society that knows what's at play, and as an economic location that we allow innovation and create value. And I have to say that the German government promises that in the next weeks, months, and years, we will be working very, very hard to ensure that Germany finds its way back to its own strength, both within the country and externally. And this is the guiding principle with which I will be representing Germany at the NATO summit in The Hague and the European Council in Brussels. Thank you for your attention.
That was German Chancellor Friedrich Merz addressing Parliament ahead of his first NATO Leaders Summit and his first meeting of the European Council as Germany's Chancellor. He spoke of Germany's ability to shape the way the world develops. How? Well, the new motto seems to be strength and reliability. For a closer look at the speech, let's bring in DW Chief Political Editor Michaela Küfner, who joins us from the Bundestag. Michaela, a little summary. What would you say were his key messages there?
Well, clearly this is a lesson of Realpolitik in motion that we just got from the German Chancellor, who wanted to mainly comment on the upcoming NATO summit and the European summit that comes straight after that. But clearly he also had to comment on the war, or what is now a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, and those military strikes. And what really stood out to me is that he did not take a stance for the rules-based international order. He took a very much a moral stance here, and this reflects how Friedrich Merz is thinking on his feet and trying to adjust very quickly to a new reality that was simply created over the weekend, also in global power politics. Just as a reminder, on Friday, Germany, through its foreign minister, was a signatory to a document calling on all sides, including the US, not to escalate the situation in Iran. Then we now heard Chancellor Merz essentially for Iran and Israel to now take this as an opportunity to make peace into the future. So he clearly doesn't want to look back. He just wants to look ahead at what is coming. And here he really outlined the challenge, the new reality, as he called it, to the German public, but also to international partners, signaling that Germany is a staunch partner within NATO, and that it is that mainly through its economic strength. And here was the link to the upcoming EU summit. He basically said that Germany will in future stand in for economic prosperity, to take any measures necessary and feasible to make Europe economically strong. Clearly, that is the one big bargaining chip that Germany has on the international stage, not being a military power, and with the Europeans being increasingly on the defensive on how they can solve their own security issues. Of course, most importantly, Ukraine, where once again he stressed that it needs all sides to want peace in order to make peace, and him quoting Vladimir Putin of Russia, the Russian president, once again having said that Ukraine essentially belongs to Russia. So that's a quick run-through and a very different kind of tone from the previous government.
Later today, Merz will be off to the NATO summit, the first he will be attending as Chancellor. What did we learn today about the role he wants Germany to play in the alliance and how?
Well, what we saw him do is try and keep the Americans on board. That is an openly declared aim of his. And that's also why we already saw the main news, essentially, of this NATO summit come through ahead of time, that 5% pledge on defense spending, 3.5% of that on core defense spending, 1.5% can be on infrastructure that also required for military purposes, with the notable exception of Spain, that doesn't want to adhere to that. But that is what the European partners of the Americans, which remain by far the most important political and military force within NATO, that's what they're putting on the table. We expect this to be a very brief session with the US president. And what he's essentially saying is, look, we're doing our homework here. We are also ramping up our capabilities for the future. At the same time, we want to keep America on our side, but also through trade. And here, I think it's very notable that he took the opportunity to once again say that he wants to continue to convince the US president that tariffs are not the way forward, that they harm his own economy. Frankly, many American advisors are trying to convince Donald Trump of the very same thing. And here he took a very firm stance. But he was very nuanced on the whole issue of Iran, simply accepting the fact that new facts have been created on the ground and not voicing criticism on what is happening in Gaza, instead pleading for the humane treatment of civilians there, particularly the children, women, and the elderly. And that is him walking on eggshells, really, trying to make the point that the treatment of civilians and the large numbers of deaths and casualties and the conditions there are not acceptable. But that's not the word he would use at this moment in time, quite clearly.
He also called for a ceasefire in Gaza. That was DW's Michaela Küfner reporting for us from the Bundestag. Thanks so much for your coverage. To Israel now, where the defense minister has ordered new strikes on Iran, saying it has violated a ceasefire that came into effect early Tuesday. The Israeli military says its defensive systems are working to intercept Iranian missiles. Now, Iran denies this. Just hours ago, U.S. President Donald Trump declared a ceasefire between the countries. That agreement came after 12 days of air and missile strikes between the longtime enemies. Shortly